Hello, a good moed and Chag Sameach to everybody. We're going to continue learning the laws of Sukkah in the Sukkah. We're on Tafresh Lamed Tes Beis, and we're in the middle of the Mishnah Berurah. We're talking about the different foods that a person eats on Sukkahs, which foods he has to eat in the Sukkah, and which foods he can eat outside of the Sukkah. So the general rule is Achilas Arai, any eating which is not a fixed eating like a meal, that can be eaten outside the Sukkah. Any food which you eat as a fixed meal has to be eaten in the sukkah. So if you're sitting down to wash and to have bread, which is usually eaten at the beginning of the meal, that has to be eaten in the sukkah. And when you eat in the sukkah, you make the blessing for the food. So if you're eating bread, you'd make hamotzi, and only after that you would make the blessing of Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu leishev b'sukkah, who commanded us to sit in the sukkah. But if someone's eating fruit, something like that, even if you have a lot of fruit, that can be eaten outside of the sukkah because that doesn't have the status of a set meal. Okay, and now we're going to talk about, that was the Shulchan Aruch, and we're going to read the Mishnah Berurah. But the Ramah did say that it's praiseworthy to eat whatever you can inside the sukkah, if possible. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says on this. See, I have my coffee. I'm having my coffee in the sukkah, but I was also having the coffee outside the sukkah. Okay, what about wine? So the Shulchan Aruch said that one could drink water and wine outside of the sukkah. So let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says here. Hatam da'achilas peros and fruit. One could eat fruit outside the sukkah. The reason is because when you eat fruit, b'kfiyas chashiv rak achilas arai depas ki achilas arai depas. When one eats fruit, even if he has a lot of it, that's really just considered like a non-set eating. So therefore, it doesn't have to be eaten in the sukkah, even if you're sitting there and having like 15 apples. And this applies also if you're eating meat, or if you are eating fish or cheese. All of those things are considered non-set eating. They're non what's called, it's achilas arai and achilas keva. So fruit, meat, fish, cheese, water, all of that can be eaten outside of the sukkah. Okay. The only thing, not the only thing, but what one has to eat in the sukkah is something made of bread or something made from the 5 grains. So pasta, for example. That's not bread, but it's something made from the 5 grains like wheat, oats, barley, spelt, and I always forget one, rye. Anything made from that has to be eaten in the sukkah. V'hinei ma she'egia ramav afilu keva alayu kagam al yayin kemo shemuchach b'darchei Moshe v'taimo deyayin ein nechshav rak ha'chilas peri v'kol shechein shar mashkin v'alkein lo chashav kviyas dideyu. So now we're going to discuss what about wine. So wine isn't so clear. The Ramah writes that even if you sit and drink a lot of wine, that doesn't have to be in the sukkah. V'da dekama achronim mefafkim b'din zeh, but many rabbis discuss this halacha, and they disagree. They say if you're going to sit around and drink wine together, and especially if you're sitting with a bunch of friends and you're sitting there for a long time and you're drinking wine, that should really be done in the sukkah. But they say, even those rabbis who say that you have to drink wine, when you drink a lot of it, it should be in the sukkah, that is, they agree that you don't make a bracha on it, right? We're going to have 3 levels here. We're going to have certain foods that are eaten in the sukkah, and you have to make a bracha on it. We're going to have certain foods that you don't have to eat in the sukkah, and then we're going to have certain foods that if you eat them, you eat in the sukkah, but don't make a bracha. So according to these rabbis, if you're just sitting and drinking a lot of wine, I don't know too many people that do this nowadays, but I guess if you're having like a Sukkah's wine and cheese party, the wine should really be drunken in the sukkah, but one would not make a blessing. And if one is having Okay, let's continue. Ule'inyan pasa baba kisnin. Pasaba bekisnin, like cakes and cookies and things like that. Yivur sham umiu roy v'nachal lechatchila shel lishos bekeva afilu shar mashkin kamo mei dvash v'sheichar elatoch hasuda o akapanim ye'echol mitchilas pas yotzim mekabea o shar tav shel asa mechamishes dagim im kofes sudaso al zev v'yivarach leishiv b'sukkah v'yotzi l'chaladeis. So, and the Mishnah Berurah writes, since we have a big discussion about this, right, as many times we do in Judaism, we have a difference of opinion. The really best thing to do is if you plan to sit, he writes even beer or meidvash, some sort of honey drink that they had. If you're going to sit around and drink a lot of wine, or you're going to sit around and drink a lot of beer with your friends, what you should do is you should wash and you should make a bracha on hamotzi, on some bread, and then for sure you can make a leishev, because everybody holds if you have bread or if you have other foods from the 5 grains that you would make a mazonos on, for sure you would make a leishev basukkah. So the best thing to do is if you plan to sit around drinking beer or drinking wine, is to have some mazonos or make hamotzi, and then you could for sure make a leishev, and you could have these other foods and these other drinks in the sukkah. I'm just going to summarize this part of the Mishnah Berurah here. If one is eating pasaba bekisnin, something that's mazonos like cookies or cake, and you're not having like a whole meal, you're just sitting down to have a few cookies and cake, which is, let's say you're having a little bit more than an egg's volume, so not so much. So there's a debate if you make a blessing of leishev b'sukkah when you eat that in the sukkah. So what the Mishnah Berurah says to do, if you're going to have a little cake or a little cookies, you should make the bracha of leishev, and after you're finished, you should sit in the sukkah for a little bit, so that it's not a blessing in vain, because this way your blessing covers the fact that you ate the food, and also that you stayed in the sukkah, you sat in the sukkah for a while. So let's just summarize all the different foods. If you are drinking water, if you're having fruit, if you're having meat, cheese, fish, anything like that, that doesn't have to be eaten in the sukkah. If you are washing, making hamotzi, bread, that has to be eaten in the sukkah, and that a blessing should be made. If one is having mazonos and sitting with friends and having a lot of it, you should eat in the sukkah and you should make a blessing. Now, if you're just having a little bit of mazonos, a little bit of cookies and cake, what you should do is you should make the leishev basukkah, and you should sit in the sukkah a little bit afterwards. And then also we mention the case if you're sitting around and drinking a lot of wine or drinking a lot of beer, the best thing to do is have that in a meal, so you don't get into any issues of whether you have to make a blessing or not. And hope everyone has a Chag Sameach.